Hello guys, it's Alamik here, and today we're going to be continuing The Tale of Emily Windsnap by Liz Kessler. Chapter 11. When I got home from school on Monday, I slumped on the sofa and threw my backpack on the floor. Mom was reading. "Did you have a nice day?" she asked, folding over the corner of the page and putting her book down. I got a glass of milk out of the fridge. I could hardly stand to look at her. How was I ever going to make her believe me? Somehow I had to make her see for herself what Mr. Beeston was up to. Plus, I still had to find my father. A gentle rap on the roof startled me out of my thoughts. I clenched my fists. If that was Mr. Beeston, "Hello, Emily," Millie said in a mysterious kind of way, as she unwrapped herself from her large black cloak. "Are you going out tonight?" I asked Mom. "It's the Bay Residence Council meeting. I told you last week." "You did?" "Nice to see I'm not the only one around here with the memory of a goldfish." She tweaked my cheek as she passed me. I checked my watch, but it's only 6 o'clock. "I need to get there early to open up. It's all at the bookstore. I need to get there early to open up. It's all at the bookshop," she called from down the corridor. "Thanks for this, Millie," she added as she came back with her coat. Get out the sofa bed if I'm late." "I might just do that," Millie replied. "My energy is a little depleted today. I think it's the new ginkgo biloba tablets on top of my shiatsu." "Sounds likely," Mom said, doing up her coat. Another knock on the roof made me jump again. "Heavens to Betsy, Emily, you're a bit twitchy tonight, aren't you?" Mom ruffled my hair as Mr. Beeston's face appeared at the door. I froze. "Only me," he said, scanning the room without coming in. "You didn't tell me he was going," I whispered, grabbing at her coat. While Mr. Beeston waited outside. "Of course he's going. He's the chairman," she whispered back. "And he's offered to help me set up," she added. Which is nice of him, by the way. "Mom, I don't want you to go." Don't want me to go? What on earth are you talking about?" "What could I say? How could I get her to believe me? She wouldn't hear a word against Mr. Beeston, the kind, sweet, lonely man. Well, I'd proved to her that he wasn't anything of that kind. Come on now, don't be a baby," she pried my fingers from her sleeve. "Millie's here to look after you. I'm just up the shore if you need me urgently, and I mean urgently." She gave me a quick peck, rubbed my cheek with her thumb, and was gone. "How come you don't go to the Bay Residence meetings, Millie?" "Oh, I don't believe in all that democratic fuss and nonsense," she said, shifting me up the sofa so she could sit down. We sat silently in front of the television. Once her first show had finished, I waited for her to tell me it was bedtime, but she didn't. I looked across at the sofa. She lay on her side, her eyes closed, mouth slightly open. "Millie?" I whispered. No reply. She was fast asleep. When would I get the opportunity like this again? I had to do it. The Great Mermer Reef might be too far to swim, but it wouldn't be too far for a boat. And now was the perfect time, and in fact, it might be my only chance. Could I do it, really? I looked at the clock. 8:30. Mom wouldn't be back for ages yet, and Millie was fast asleep. I grabbed the engine key from the peg and crept outside. There was probably another half an hour or so before it was dark. I could handle the darkness now anyway. I'd gotten used to the sea at night. But would I remember how to operate the boat? I'd only done it a few times. We had to go around to South Pool Harbor every couple of years to get the hull checked out, and Mom usually lets me take it some of the way. We hardly ever use the sail. I don't know why we haven't, really. The pier was quiet, except for all the masts clinking and clattering in the wind. I pulled at my hair, twisting it frantically around my fingers. I probably looked like someone about to take their first bungee jump, but I simply had to do it, however dangerous or scary or insane it might be. Uncoiling the ropes, I had one last look down the pier, deserted. Almost. Someone was coming out of the arcade. I ducked below the mast and waited. It was Mandy's mom. She was heading down the pier, probably to the meeting, and a figure was standing in the doorway of the arcade. Mandy! I ducked down again, waited for her to go back inside. Had she seen me? The rope slackened in my hand. I was drifting away from the jetty, close enough to jump back and pull the boat in again, but floating farther away by the second. What should I do? There was still time to abandon the whole thing. Then a breeze lifted the front of the boat and water, and without more thinking on my part, the decision was made. I glanced back. She's gone. I hurled the rope onto the jetty and turned the ignition key. Nothing happened. I tried again. It started this time, and I held my breath and its familiar dunka 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 broke into the silence of the evening. Hey, I turned around. Fish girl! It was Mandy. She stepped onto our dock. What do you think you're doing? She called. Nothing, nothing. What kind of stupid thing was that to say? Oh, I know. Are you running away from that Julia doesn't want to be your friend? What? She doesn't want to know you anymore after you blew her off last weekend. Lucky she had me there to make her see someone cares about her feelings. Mandy pushed as she let an evil smile crawl across her face. Your mom knows you're taking the boat out, I assume. Of course, I asked quickly. I'm just moving it over to South Pool. Yeah, shall we check? She waved her cell phone in front of her. You wouldn't. No? You want to make a bet? You think I haven't been waiting for an opportunity like this? Little Miss Goody Two-Shoes, making out like you're so sweet and innocent. The boat bobbed farther away from the dock. Why do you hate me so much? I called over the engine. Let me think. She put her fingers dramatically in her mouth and looked away as though talking to an audience. She gets me grounded, steals my best friend, turns the swimming teacher against me. She's a great big fat show-off. Mandy looked at me. I really don't know. Then she turned and started walking back at the jetty, waving her phone in the air. Mandy, don't, please. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, she called over her shoulder. See ya. What should I do? I couldn't go back. I couldn't. This was probably my one and only chance to find my father, and Mandy Rushton was not going to ruin it. I forced her words out of my mind. She wasn't going to stop me. She wasn't. I turned my attention back to my plan. Minutes later, I was edging away from the pier and holding the tiller and carefully navigating my way out of the harbor. I went over what I'd done when I'd driven the boat to South Pool and tried hard to convince myself that what I was doing now really wasn't very difficult. As I sailed out to the sea, I looked back at Brightport Bay. The last rays of the sun winked and glinted on the water like tiny spotlights. Ocean spray dusted my hair. I closed my eyes for a second while I thought about what I was doing. I had to find the Great Murmur Reef. Based on the time Shona and I had gotten halfway there, I knew more or less where it was. So I studied the horizon and aimed for the section that was lighter than the rest. The part that would shimmer 100 colors when I got close by. It got very dark suddenly as we sliced slowly through the water. King never does anything in a hurry. My hand was getting cold, holding on to the tiller, and I was getting wet. King bounced on the water, gliding along with the swells, then rising and bumping down over the waves. It had been quite calm when I set off, and farther out I got, the more hilly the sea became. Above me, stars appeared one by one. Soon the night sky was packed. At that half moon sat among them, and its other half a silhouette, semi-visible as though impatient for its turn to come. King swayed from side to side, lumbering slowly through the peaks and troughs. Was I getting anywhere? I looked behind me. Brightport was miles away. If I closed one eye and held my hand, I could hide the whole town behind my thumbnail. Up and down we went, climbing the waves, bouncing on the swells, inching ever closer to the Great Murmur Reef. My eyes watered as I strained to keep them on the patch of light on the horizon, shimmering and glowing and coming gradually closer. I let myself dream about Jake, about my dad. I'd get into the prison and we'd escape, hiding him in the boat. We'd cruise back to the pier before anyone ever even realized we were gone. Then Mom, waiting in the sea at the end of the pier, and I'd ask her mom to come for a walk with me, and then I'd leave her there on her own for a minute, and he would appear. They'd see each other, and it would be like they'd never been apart. Mom would remember everything, and we'd all live happily ever after. Excellent plan. Excellent daydream. Anyhow, a plan was something I didn't exactly have. Emily! A voice shouted my thoughts. I spun around, searching the night sky. There was a shape behind me, a long way away, but coming nearer. A boat. One of those little murder boats with outboard engines that they hire out in the summer. As it got closer, I could see an outline of two people, one leaning forward in front, one in the back at the tiller. Emily, a mom's voice, and not just a woman. Mom! Then I recognized the other voice. Come back here, young lady. Whatever you think you're doing, you had better stop it. And now, Mr. Beeston. I shoved the tiller across and quickly swapped sides as the boat changed direction, pushing the throttle as far forward as it would go. Come on, I prayed. The boat spluttered and chugged in reply, but it didn't speed up. What are you doing here? I shouted over the engines and waves. What am I doing here? Mom called back. Emily, what are you doing here? But your meeting. The motorboat edged closer. The meeting got canceled when Mr. Russian's girl phoned in and in a state. Should have thought you might be in danger. I should have known she'd do it. I don't know how I could have thought even for a moment that she wouldn't. I'm sorry, Mom, I called. I've got to do this. You'll understand. Honestly, trust me. Oh, please come back, darling, Mom called. Whatever it is, we can sort it out. King's engine sputtered again and seemed to be slowing down. Seawater soaked my face as we bounced on the waves, rolling and peaking like a mountain range. Look what you're doing to your mother, Mr. Beeson shouted. I won't have it. Do you hear me? I won't allow it. I ran my sleeve over my wet face. You can't tell me what to do, I shouted back, anger pushing away my fear and any desire to keep my stupid promise to Mr. Beeson. It's not like you're my father or anything. Mr. Beeson didn't reply. He was concentrating hard, and had almost caught up with me. Meanwhile, the shimmering light on the horizon was glowing and growing bigger all the time. I could almost see the different colors. Come on, King, I said under my breath. It's not much farther now. I looked back at the motorboat. Mom was covering her face with her hands. Mr. Beeson held the tiller tight, his face pinched and contorted. You remember my father? I called to him. You know your best friend. What kind of person lies to their best friend's wife for years, huh? I don't know what foolish ideas gotten into your head, child, but you had better put an end to them right now before I put an end to them for you. For you. Mr. Beeson's eyes shone like a cat's as he caught mine. Can't you see how much you are upsetting your mother? Upsetting my mother! Ha! Like you care! Emily, please! Mom called, her arms stretched out towards me. Whatever it is, we'll talk about it. Don't blame Mr. Beeson. He's only trying to help. Come on, King! I said out loud as the engine cracked and popped. Mom! I turned to face her. They were only a couple of yards away from me now. Mr. Beeson isn't who he says he is, and he's not trying to help you. Then the engine died. What's the matter with this thing? I shouted. You know, we never keep much diesel on board, Mom called out. It's a fire hazard. What? Who told you that? I was in despair. I did, Mr. Beeson called. Don't want you injuring yourselves, do I? He smiled his creepy smile at me. That was it. I stood and lurched forward, grabbed the mast. I had to sail the rest of the way. I uncleated the main sheet to free the boom, and that's the wooden pole that runs along the bottom of the sail. Then I undid the main halyard, the rope at the base of the mast, and hoisted the main sail. As a gust of wind filled the sail, the boom swayed out wildly over the water. I grabbed for it, but the main sheet, that's the rope that controls the boom, but the gust sent it whole length running out to the cleat out of the reach. I watched helplessly as the last hope unraveled with it. Oh, Emily, please stop it, Mom shouted as the boat lurched to the side. You don't need to upset yourself like this. I know what it's about. What? If you know what you're doing in there with him. It's natural for you to feel like this, darling. Mr. Beeson told me about you being a little jealous about how that might make you try to turn me against him. But he's just a friend. There's no need for you to go fretting like this. The shimmering was really close now. I could see colors and lights dancing on the surface of the water. It was like fireworks display. I groaned. Mom, it's not. I broke off when I saw Mom's stricken face. It looked like those performance artists on the boardwalk pretended to be statues. In a soft voice that I barely recognized, she said, No one could ever take the place of your father. She was gazing wide-eyed at the water. My father? For a moment, everything stood completely still, like a photo. The sea stopped moving. Mr. Beeson got to the tiller. My mom and I locked eyes, as though seeing each other for the first time. Then Mr. Beeson leaped into action. That's it, he yelled. I'm coming aboard. Wait! I shouted as a wave caught the side of the boat. King lurched sideways, the sail swinging across the other side. Mr. Beeson had just pulled himself aboard when thwack! The boom swang back again and knocked him flying. Arg! He clutched his head as he fell backward, crashing on onto the deck with a thump. He lay flat on his back without moving. Mom screamed and stood up. The motor rocked wildly. Mom, be careful! I ran to the side and leaned over. Get on! I shouted. She was alongside King. Mom didn't move. You have to come on board. Come on, Mom. I held her arm. I'll help you. I can't, she said woodenly. You can, Mom. You've got to. I scrabbled around in the bench seat and pulled out a life jacket. King rocked like a coin-operated bucking bronco at the arcade. The sail was still waving off to the side, and the main sheet dangling hopelessly out of reach. Holding tight to the railing, I threw the life jacket to Mom. You'll be fine, I called out. Just get on board fast before you drift away. She stared at me. Do it! Mom stood up in her rocky boat, the life jacket on, and suddenly lunged for the steps. I grabbed her hand and pulled herself up on the deck. Oh, Emily, she said, I'm so sorry. What for? It's all my fault, Mom said, holding on to me with one hand and the railing with the other as she swayed from side to side. Of course it's not your fault, Mom. If it's anyone's fault, it's Mr. Beeston's. He's not what he seems, Mom. He's been... Mom put her finger on my lips. I know why you're here. Why we're here. I remember. Mom pulled me towards her and held me tight over her shoulder. I could see the water shimmering, sparkling like an electric light show, the great murmur reef. I wriggled out of Mom's grasp. You remember what? Mom hesitated. It's all a bit hazy, she said. All at once, the sky exploded with light. Look! I pointed behind her. Pink lights danced below the water, while a dozen colors jumped in the air above it. I know this place, Mom said, her voice shaking. He brought me here. Who, Mr. Beeston? I glanced nervously across at him. He still hadn't moved. Mom clutched the railings at the boat, as the boat tilted again, and I made my way over to join her. Her face seemed to be covered in spray from the sea. But when I looked more closely, I realized it wasn't seawater at all. It was tears. On our first anniversary, she said. She'd been here with my dad. You told me this was where they would take him when they caught him. Who would take him? If they ever found out about us, he knew they'd get him in the end. We both knew it, but we couldn't stop because we loved each other so much. Mom's body sagged. I put my arms around her. I'm going to find him, I said, holding her tighter. That's why I took the boat. I did it for all of us. I can't bear it, she said. I can't remember everything now. How could I have forgotten him? He was taken away because he loved me, and I forgot all about him. How could I ever forget myself? Mom, it's not your fault. You didn't just forget him. I did, she gulped. You know I did. You asked about him, and I didn't even know. I couldn't remember anything. But you weren't to blame. Mom wiped a curtain of wet hair off her face, and she looked. And looked at me. Who was then? I nodded a thumb behind me. Mr. Beeston, I whispered. Oh, Emily, don't start with that claptrap again. It's not claptrap. I tried to keep my voice down. I didn't want to wake him and ruin everything. It's true, I whispered. He's not what he seems. Emily, please, don't make this worse on us. Mom, listen to me. I snapped. She caught my eyes just for a second, but then looked at Mr. Beeston. We should see how he is. Mom shook herself free from my grasp, and I stumbled along the deck to him. He'll be fine, I said. Don't worry about him. Mom ignored me and crouched down next to him. I crouched down beside her as she leaned over his chest and listened. Then she looked up at me, her face paler than the million stars shining above us. Oh my God, she said. I think we've killed him. Thank you for listening to chapter 11 of The Tale of Emily Windsnap, and I'll mook out. Peace.